for this episode, I actually saw a perfect fucking topic. This is right up the alley of the sort of things, as I alluded to, I want to discuss on this show, which is there's a thread on Reddit where basically the LPL now, as you've seen with them partnering with Dom and with them doing a lot more stuff on Twitter, by the way, they're going really way more ham on socials. They're trying to get this English language fan base to come and watch the LPL. By the way, I'll even say quite a good timing of when to do that, and considering how badly like Korea's fallen down the last few years. Korea, aside from LS, doesn't really have the big draw in terms of the talent even. So if anything, there's sort of like, I would say, a little bit of an overlap there that you could maybe convince to come over the LPL, which is the better league and obviously has all these fantastic teams. So one of the things that was published in this was a video where basically it was about the training schedules that players have. Now, anyone who's seen any of the shows in the last couple of months that had Nelson, who obviously works with G2 now and formerly was a coach with LNG, he's basically said as much. It's just that fans, they have to be told things a million times before it sort of really sinks in. So the interesting thing to me basically was when you looked into it, these teams effectively were training like, I mean, roughly 12 hours a day. If you looked at how many hours, like the time span that they're training, basically you were just working all day. You were doing all sorts of crazy shit. Whereas if you went and looked at the LCS teams, they were doing significantly less. Like they were only doing a certain block of time period. A lot of the solo queue stuff's entirely optional. Like you don't do these multiple sessions. So let's just start there, right? Crumbs, obviously you used to be a pro yourself. You've worked in a bunch of different teams. You know the LCS teams. You heard some of the stories of the Koreans maybe back in the day. What are your initial thoughts on this? Is this what you would have expected?
Yeah, so this is already entirely expected, and there were some things in the LCS that I think are still true today. I have not confirmed with any team, so it might not be the case. But one thing that is worth noting is that LPL trains 7 days a week. So you obviously can't keep that schedule when you have competitive days, when you have to actually play on stage. So what a lot of these teams still do, though, is they scrim on days where they actually play on stage.
Nelson said they still play even on like the morning a scrim of the if they're going to play like an LPL match that night. Yeah,
and that is one thing that was very much rare when I was playing in the LCS, to scrim during the day. And the reason being, not that I agree with it, but this was the reason: you don't want to tilt your players. Like the players didn't want to get tilted. They didn't want to lose a scrim. It's like, oh, what happens if you lose the scrim block and then you're backfiring on your strategy, right? You have doubt on the things that you prepped. And so they tried to fix that by, well, let's just scrim only the academy teams. Right? Let's have an easier scrim block right before. But then the question was, well, what if we lose to the academy team during that scrim block? Are we going to even kill the morale more? And so a lot of the teams have just abolished scrims during that day. And so the training days, or the actual LCS days, felt so empty because you spend all of this day around a single match that could last 30 minutes. And then you go home and then you play solo queue. And it feels almost like a day off. It feels like your LCS day was a day off. So already I think that that's an area where the LCS teams could do much more if they wanted to practice during that day. And I honestly think it's just going to show. It's a cost that they're going to have to pay, and it's no surprise to people. I don't think it should be a surprise that the people that are performing at the best of the world are doing nothing else. This is in every single field ever, has always been the case. What do you think Michael Phelps is doing besides swimming and doing things about swimming? Nothing else, right? All of the best athletes around their craft are always doing something about their craft. And it's just what happens when you have such a giant field or such a giant pool of competitors. In high school, when you're competing against like 10 dudes in your grade, you probably don't have to push yourself that hard and you'll still be at the top. And then you can ride that for maybe even college, but you're not going to go global. And so this to me is not surprising. And I don't think you can change it. I think that trying to become sustainable, be like, oh, we're going to put these sustainable practices for people so that they can have a longer career. Guess what? Some dude's going to say, fuck that. I want to win right now. I'd rather give my health, my mental health, my physical health, all of it right now to win in the next 5 years. Let's go. They want to do that, and they probably end up achieving it. And it's their prerogative to do that. So I think that this is just something that North American players and just Western players in general Some do, but a lot are not really sensing that. And I'll tell you, on a personal level, this is something that I sensed in the first World Championship when I was watching SKT. I was in the stands playing I had already lost, right? It was finals. I'm watching SKT go up against RNG, and I see their first game, and I'm just looking at the demeanor of the players. I'm looking back to my own teammates, I'm on Dignitas, and in that moment, I realized there is no way I can beat them. Like, unless I am willing to give up everything for playing and doing all I can, sacrifice everything to become the best at League, I am just not going to beat SKT. The best in the world are giving up everything. That's when I saw what it meant to be the best in the world. And that's when I realized I probably need to plan a way out of my career because I'm not going to sacrifice as much to get this far.
Right, Oddball, you can comment from any angle on this, mate. What are you thinking about this topic?
Well, I really appreciated the point that Crumbs brought up, just talking about how basically if you look at any other competitive discipline, it's the case where you're going to give it 100% and you're going to practice all the time. It doesn't matter based off of the morale angle that if you play a scrim before a game, you're going to, if you lose the game, you're going to be unmotivated. Just looking at something like basketball, they have pre-game shoot-arounds. If a player misses a three-point shot, they're not going to be like, oh, well, I'm completely lost for the rest of the game. Let's just not ever do that. Let's have it where we have absolutely no warm-up. I think that just from the perspective that you always want to obviously give it 100%. And to the point that people say, oh, well, someone's going to be burnt out. Someone's going to just be completely trashed if they try and give it 100%. I don't even think if you look at from LCK or LPL, the career lengths, I don't think it's really any much shorter in any significant amount compared to something like the LCS. So just from that perspective, I think that, and obviously it just comes from the case of satisfaction, of being able to actually win. That's obviously an incredibly motivating factor and something that is going to want you to be able to continue to rise to the occasion and actually give it your all. So that's mainly my perspective on it.
The main problem I have with this whole topic goes like this. The reason why it's an issue is it's not that we're looking at this and going, wow, interesting. So how could we get it so that players in our region? No. The entire issue is always now going to be framed because of this whole thing where companies have to flex that they care about mental health. Clearly not true if you look at the actions of most of the companies. But because they have to flex that that's a thing in terms of optics, it's all framed as, right, how do we get the same results as the LPL, but without what they're doing in terms of, that, which is listen, motherfucker, we didn't figure out with practicing all the time how to beat the LPL and LCK. Now you're asking for some absolute miracle worker level shit, where I have to have my players play less and then beat their results. That's some Gordian knot level shit. No one's got the solution on that one. So for me, the initial premise actually makes it less interesting. The hypothetical is one where it's right now there's no real solutions on board. Because I have to say, if you go and you ask people like Nelson or people from the LPL, they'll tell you the obvious answer, which is, well, at a minimum, you could start practicing as much. At least fucking do that. To them, it's alien concept to them, by the way, that we would expect to be able to have the same results with less. They don't even get that as a premise. Because here's the problem. They're not burning out in the sense of because we want to win, we're going to do it. They happen in their cultures to do this anyway. It's not about whether you're the best. The part that's probably the most misunderstood is the idea that the guy who would consider doing this in the West, it's been done before, would be when TSM had that lineup with Bjergsen and Doublelift, and they said that they were practicing all the time. The best team will do it because they want to try and match the best Asian team. You're already at a disadvantage. The idea that you're the one now deciding if you can do it means it's too late. That horse has already bolted from the stable. The guy who currently you've never heard of in LCK, he's in the worst team and he'll be one of the best players in a year from now. He's already practicing on that schedule today. And not because he's going to win LCK. He's not. He's not going to get past 10th. He's not going to go to Worlds. He's not doing any of this shit. They just already have it hard-coded into their culture at the moment. You work as hard as you can. And guess what? This is the fact that we don't have in the West. Because if you don't, you're out the door and I've got 50 guys can come in the door. If it's LPL, I've got 1,000 guys can come in the door. So there's another factor, by the way. They also don't have to care, Crumbs. This is why this is a subtle point people might miss. One of the reasons, if I'm Team Liquid, I actually do slightly have to care whether the players get burned out is because if the players that get burned out are Doublelift, Jensen. These are guys who actually have like incredible individual value that is not matched by other players in the league. If I lose Doublelift, the next best player, even if he's as good, loses all the marketing value, loses all the nostalgia element for the fans. If I lose Jensen, I might get Abadage, but he's not Jensen, he doesn't have the Jensen track record, blah, blah, blah. So I actually, in some way, I have to keep these players happy. If I'm in the LPL and the equivalent of Jensen says, this is getting to be a bit boss, I can't practice, then get the fuck out. I've got a guy in my LDL squad who actually, no joke, is probably as good as you. I just didn't play him in the team yet. Like that, I know it sounds harsh, but both aspects to me are why this is like, basically, it's an interesting topic, but I don't think there's any solutions coming out of it. Like,
I think there was a solution offered, which I actually think is almost naive to think that this would actually fix the issue, which is that we want better ways to practice, right? So the solution was, well, if you gave us practice tool, we would practice more efficiently, and then we wouldn't have to put in that many hours. The people playing 16 hours a day are just going to play 16 hours of practice tool, right? They're still going to put in more hours of whatever practice method is available. So it actually doesn't matter. And I think it's super obvious when you just boil it down to what you prioritize as a person, and you just map out your life and like, all right, I want to play League. I need to eat food. I need to do all these things. I need to put more time because time is the only thing that I can use to get better at League, right? I just need more time. Where can I cut this away from? Cut it off from every other aspect of my life. And I think that a player like Caps was actually, at some point, I don't know now, was similar to that. I remember hearing stories that he didn't even have a cell phone. Right, to me, that's very impressive. Like, the guy didn't have a cell phone and still just playing League, like just everything having to do with League. Guess what? Best Western player, right? Maybe contestable with perks, but at the very least is right there in that conversation. He gave it all, right? He put everything on the line. You have somebody like Double was just playing League more than anything else. Not really doing anything else. Same thing with a player like Perks. The ones that have been the very best in the West have also sacrificed a lot. So it's really not a surprise. It's just that the percentage of people doing it here is so much lower.
I also think, dude, like one thing I'll just throw in quickly is this, right? Which is I don't think people are really thinking about because here's the problem. To solve the issue, not only like you're saying, Perks, you have to pump up the productivity on our end, like the efficiency as it were, because it's the only way you could use the same amount of time and get more results. But the other part people aren't thinking about is this. Even if you do all that, what stops the LPL still as being the best? That's the problem. You'd almost have to go and look it up. Harrison Berger on this motherfucker. You'd have to actually literally mandate that Koreans and Chinese aren't allowed to practice beyond a set amount of hours. That's the only way I can see to fix it. Because put it this way, as you pointed out, it's not just League of Legends, it's not just esports. Any field, by the way, that tends to be about extreme concepts, like you must have incredible success and make lots of money, people will always say, well, I'm willing to trade absolutely everything for that because I'm just a raw materialist. So the stock market, traditional sports, combat sports, people will cut every corner they can to get the short-term win. Now, it's true in the long term, you want to be like, but that'll shorten your career length and all, blah, 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 blah. Like, maybe, but the point is the guy isn't doing it thinking 8 years from down the line. He's trying to think, how good can I be in a month from now? And unfortunately, if that's the battle you're involved in, I mean, like you're saying, good luck like revolutionising how practice exists just so you can get as good. What were you going to say, Oddball?
I was just going to ask, just from what you've observed, Crumbs, when players come over, like players from South Korea or from China, when they come to NA, do you think that for the most part, their practice regimen is lowered, that they kind of absorb the NA mentality once they come over?
If they've given up, if they've given up. If not, though, I think they'll keep trying. I think Core JJ was an example of a player that hadn't given up, that was pushing the rest of the team to play much more, right? When you ask, what other games do you play? No. Right, it's just League, right? There's no other games to play. Like, if Faker plays other games, it's because he's in a queue time, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to be playing some WoW. I've got some hours to kill. I'm going to play WoW. No, it's playing League all the time. So I think that the practice regimen of foreign players drops only if they have accepted that they have lost, that it's doomed, that there's no way out. And I think that for the most part, they increase the practice regimen. Now, I do think that a lot of players initially, though, played a ton, but as it comes and goes with maybe the scrim schedule, now they're burnt out in scrims a little bit, it starts to drop. And I think that's the largest area where the discrepancies lie. It's not so much about grinding solo queue, it's grinding scrims with solo queue in the practice environment and being consistent at it. Because a lot of these players, yeah, they can go 16 hours a day. A lot of LCS players, no problem, can keep up the LPL schedule. Can they do it for a month though and still be feeling good about their game? That's more unlikely.
Basically, one of the things that has fucked, it's actually the dark secret by why so many Korean players who came to the LCS just drop off after 6 months or a year, is either they literally just practice and are like Crum says, I give up. Like, this is just shit practice. No one else is trying. You know, since my teammates aren't trying, why? But like, by the way, teammates is probably the biggest one that crushes these guys. They just mentally break. Yeah. What they do is they sit there. They've just played a whole week of LCS games. Let's say like they went 1 and 2, right? To a Korean, by the way, to not go 3 and 3, you failed already. So you must go and do your work to justify your pay. Because remember, you're used to a world where it's a world of scarcity. Like to you, there's only 10 jobs in the whole scene. Meanwhile, it's abundance to your employer. He has thousands of people he could employ. So you always have to keep in his mind, like, I'm doing everything I can for this spot. Even if, by the way, you're a star player. And then on top of that, the first few months you do that. You keep trying, you keep doing extra solo queue after scrims, but eventually you just get sick of looking in the practice facility and seeing nobody else there, or one guy watching anime eating some fucking fast food or something, and you're thinking like, I'm giving up my fucking life. I live in a foreign country where I don't even speak the language. I'm practicing all day long. I'm trying and grinding in this shit solo queue, and then the other guys just don't even do it. Like, they just turn up, they scream a little bit. I have one guy who's stuck in Diamond. He's my teammate and he gets paid $200,000 a year. Like, dude, some of them just mentally break. Like, they can't process the idea. Like, because think about it, right? In that scenario, here's the best analogy ever. It's like being in the fucking college project where you're the one who ends up having to do all the work, but the others all get to have credit because it's a group project. Everyone knows that's the most depressing feeling in the world. You even start to think evil thoughts like, maybe I should intentionally fail the project so they don't get a fucking good grade. Like, you start to actually hate your own teammates because they're just not contributing. So a lot of them basically can't handle that. Like, that's one of the other reasons why they say that whole thing of like, get more than one Korean. It's not just to like hang out with me. It's because then at least there's one other fucker who's like got the same mentality. He's still trying. They can duo with each other. Like, it's dark, but it's a reality, unfortunately. I've seen a lot of players just lose their shit in the West.
You know, I think the solution for the West would just be, you actually probably need to adopt the same schedule, the same regiment, but just use the money that you have. And it's not like the LPL isn't doing this already. Just have actual nutrition, right? Prioritize the nutrition, prioritize exercise for the players. That's mandatory, right? And mandatory like stretching so that they don't get carpal tunnel, like all these things. Like, if you need to have the players take a 2-minute break in between solo queue games so that they stretch their hands, recalibrate their eyes, these kinds of things, just do it. But then you've done what you can to alleviate the physical damage that they will inevitably suffer from this, but you will at least set them up to be able to work the same amount and probably last a little bit longer than if they didn't have that. So I think you have to put in that same amount of time, but you can use the resources that we have here to provide for the aspects that are gonna still contribute severely to performance.
And even then, with all of that considered, I would still argue that just Chinese, and I think everybody would agree that Chinese and Korean practice in general is more efficient and better practice in general. They have a way more competitive solo queue that obviously allows them to hone their mechanics a lot more. And obviously they have way more teams. They have about 12 elite teams that they can always scrim against. So I agree with both of you that it is a problem that there's really not any good solution at the moment for.
If you don't play solo queue, get VODs. Watch some VODs. That's what I'll say. Watch some VODs.
Actually, I'll do one last little rant, basically, because it's one that's actually from so long ago now on some insight. People won't even know this in the modern day. They'll have only watched like the last few years. Basically, I actually explained this way back in time. I think it was the episode that we had Soaz on, maybe. It was one from like 2015 or something in some insight. Basically, I had this analogy where I explained to people why you will never, ever actually be able to compete with the mentality, the work ethic of the best Koreans. I'll even add in a fresh anecdote that I might not have told. So basically, way back back in the day in Counter-Strike in like 2009, I went to China to go to an event where they were first doing big events in Asia. And when I was there in China, I'm in the biggest cities in China, but like a decently medium-sized one. I was walking down like the main high street, which by the way, at the time already it was quite developed. It looked like it could have been like, like a Western city or something, I will say if you move beyond the high street, every street, my joke was, you were going back in time a decade, every street you went into the sort of suburb area. But okay, if you're on Main Street, it looks legit, it looks like, it could be anywhere. It could be anywhere in the world, right? I saw some people, Crumbs, fixing a street light. And this is how they were fixing it. One of them was stood with a ladder balanced on his shoulders, and another man was on the top of the ladder fixing the streetlight. And the first thing I thought in that moment, Crumbs, was this is why the West has zero chance against China in any sort of a level playing field when it comes to basic tasks that like a human can carry out. Because in my country, the United Kingdom, right, that would immediately be like against about 50 laws called health and safety. Like you need like obviously like the fucking ladder would have to be on the floor. There'd have to be two people on either side holding the ladder. The ladder would have to have regulation fucking rubber grips. You'd have to have some sort of license to do that work. And basically the amount of red tape and extra people and extra money you'd have to spend means that whoever was getting this light fixed has already beaten any possible Western country. Like you just logistically can't do what they can do. So similarly, right, I made an analogy like this. I think this is why I did it on the episode of if Soaz was indeed on this episode. Because if you remember, famously, Soaz got mega flamed when they had All Stars 2014, which is really like the precursor to MSI. Famously, Fnatic didn't bother practicing and just turned up and got completely rocked by like SK Telecom, right? And what people forget about this story is Soaz doesn't give a fuck. So he just openly said, like, well, of course we didn't practice and we haven't had any time off in ages. Like, think about it. Like we played all the EULCS splits last year. Then we went to Worlds. Then if you remember back then, they used to have other tournaments like the Battle of the Atlantic and IEM Cologne. We had all these off-season tournaments. Then we came in. Then we've won the split. And now we're going to this tournament. And now you want us to practice for this extra tournament, an all-star tournament. So his whole perspective was like, I have to have some time off, right? That's a champion. That's one of the most decorated Western champions ever. And what he was trying to tell you was essentially the difference in culture between the two regions. So I'll do it very quickly. If you are a Westerner, the dream of esports is this. Yeah, I want to be one of the best. Yeah, I'd like to win if I could. These are really nice things. But after that, I want the reward. And the reward is this, life freedom. I get to have a holiday when I want to in the best place in the world. I get to take my girlfriend and buy her expensive things. I get to live in, essentially, if it's a sports stream, the mansion. I get to have the Lamborghini. I get to chill out. In my off-season, I get to fucking have fun. Now, here's the difference, right? If you're Faker or pick like probably a Japanese gymnast or something, a similar kind of scenario, I imagine. If you're Faker, right, same scenario, you're the best. So you've just won LCK and then you went and you won Worlds. Good news, you won, so you got to stay on top. You better practice the hardest out of everyone. Let's say you have a slump though, Crumbs. In the spring split, you don't do that well, you come 7th. You better practice as hard as you can. You're in 7th. You got to get back to 1st. The joke is you never get time off. There will never, ever, ever, ever be time off. You could win every tournament as like effectively Faker did out of what you can win in League. And you still don't get to have the time off. The reward that the Westerner thinks is coming is never coming. And here's the bad news for you guys. The guy who's the Westerner is competing against Faker. That's why he's fucked. Do you see it? Because when he gets what he wants as his dream, it includes having time off that Faker doesn't ever imagine he's going to have. Or, by the way, even want to have. There's the most fucked up element of it all. In his culture, Faker would even think it would be like relinquishing his duty to take a week or 2 weeks off in the summer. So I won't say it's like impossible we can improve in the West, but like, there's no catching up. Like these areas, the delta between us and them it's for a good reason. And I would even say this, it's dark, but I don't even know that you'd want to. Like, I don't think you wouldn't want, put it this way, if the worst thing you could ever do as a Westerner is get the cursed monkey paw and go, I wish we practice as much as the LPR. Mate, you'll be dead in a year. Like, it'd get dark. It'd get really dark, I'm telling you.
I think the epitome of that mindset that I remember seeing from the LCK was when, this must have been maybe 2014 or 2015 OGN champions, when SKT, I think, swept 3-0. They're celebrating on stage, and Piglet is weeping because he thought he didn't play well, right?
Yes.
They crushed. He shat on the other enemy team. But he's weeping more than as if he lost because he thought he didn't play well. I have never seen that before. And on a side note, I think it would be for another podcast, but the over-regulation of the Western world is definitely a very interesting topic.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.